is Lou Stowers introducing the Bruce Cook Conversation with host Bruce Cook, diving deep with amazing guests, trending now, and making a difference. Here's Bruce.
Good evening, KABC listeners. It's Bruce Cook, and it's time for the conversation. It's Saturday night. We've got a lot to talk about. Our show today is all about money. It's about your money, my money, the nation's money, the world's money, and how money makes the world go around. You've heard that before, ladies and gentlemen. I know you have. My very special guest on the show today is a friend of mine who is a highly respected financial investment advisor. His name is Ivan Illan. He's with a company called, let me get this straight, Aligne Wealth Advisors Investment Management. The acronym is AWAIM. He is headquartered on the West Coast in Century City, California, with offices around the country and outside of the country, I also believe. Anyway, Ivan is an expert. He has been on all sides of the market. He knows it inside and out, and he's going to share with us today not just information on the market, the ups and downs, the craziness that's happening, although we're going to dive into that, but also on the ramifications of all that's happening in the social and political arenas that affect our money, and that includes the prices in the market, not the stock market, the grocery market. It includes the items like the threat of tariffs. It includes all kinds of stuff that we're all looking and watching. It includes Elon Musk and his chainsaw. And with that, Ivan, please join me.
Hi, Bruce. Good to be with you again.
It's always a pleasure. Listen, do you have a chainsaw, Ivan? Do you need a chainsaw? Do you need one?
No.
Are you sure?
I seem to survive 30 years in this career so far without a chainsaw, but, for big projects, maybe you just need one.
Well, do you mind if we start with that?
Yeah.
I think Americans, especially on the conservative side of the coin here, totally understand the idea that the federal government is bloated and there have to be changes. There have to be examination of where there can be cost savings and reductions. This has not happened overnight. It's been 50 years since things have gotten so big in America and government employs so many millions of people. But do you think that the chainsaw mentality is creating chaos? And is it creating chaos in the market? The market is up and down. One day it's down 700 points and the next day it's back up 400. Has this happened in the recent history?
Well, so this is a very natural and I think very good question that you're posing, which is, how big is the federal government? Is it really so incredibly bloated that requires drastic measures? And I think most people on either side of the aisle would agree that, wow, it seems pretty quick, and things seem to be pretty drastic in terms of getting things, changed. Maybe changed for the better, changed for the worse. We're not quite sure yet, but things are changing very rapidly. So one of the things I looked at a few weeks ago was, how big was the government back in the day, like 1970s versus the early 2000s versus now? And I found something very, very stunning, and this is just based on Bureau of Labor Statistics data, easily available through the Federal Reserve Bank, St. Louis Data Bank. So anybody can see this, and you just look at the number of federal employees. And how has that number changed over the past, let's just call it 50 years, going back to 1970? And what I was really struck by is the growth that has occurred in the number of federal employees over that entire period of time. Now, it's oscillated quite a bit, way up and way down. But over that entire period, as of the beginning of this year, since 1970, there's only 6%, single digit, 6% more federal employees than we had in 1970. So right off the bat, I was a little surprised by that, because it seemed that, this government incredibly bloated, totally inefficient. But the number would kind of argue with that, which is over 50 years they have only 6% more employees. Well, maybe that isn't so bad. Now,
that doesn't jive. That doesn't jive with what is being told to the American people.
Well, absolutely not. Also, there's not a lot of specific numbers being given, to Americans about really the size, the number, and rate of change, and all of these types of things. So you don't have a lot of context to even go on, what's actually happening. And so I was really struck by that. And the biggest decline we actually saw in federal employees was during the Clinton administration. Of course, a Democrat administration, and that was the most extreme reduction of federal employees.
And what reason goes along with that?
What was that?
What reason during the Clinton administration would be associated with that decline?
Well, it was the same reason you're hearing mostly today, which is, government's too big. Let's reduce the size. We don't need so many people to do the same amount of work. We have something called computers nowadays, so we don't, that apparently not everybody's using computers, because remember, Illan made the big to-do about the basement that all the files are in, that everyone has to take a 10-minute elevator just to fire a federal employee. So okay, I think most people would agree there's probably room for more efficiency and more use of computer technology within the federal government. But that was the main impetus for it back in the early 2000s.
Well, the interesting thing is...
Very successful.
Yeah, the interesting thing is during those Clinton years, I believe we had a balanced budget.
Not only that, we actually ran a surplus during the Clinton years. And that surplus was actually not only because of the reductions in government expenditures, but also it was a hangover from the first Bush's administration, W. Bush's administration, in when they were bailing out the savings and loans banks way back in the day. The government, the Treasury actually took on, the Federal Reserve took on securities from these banks. And so they, many years later, started selling stock of those banks again at a profit. So the federal government was actually in the business of making money. That is a completely foreign concept, but it also speaks directly to the point of the federal government, which is to be the buyer of last resort. This is the point of the Federal Reserve, to be the buyer of last resort. When nobody else wants to buy our Treasury debt, no one else wants to buy anything, any stock of any company in this country, it's okay if the Federal Reserve steps in to backstop some of this, particularly Treasury debt. But today, the Federal Reserve Bank does not have such expansive capability. It's really hamstrung. It's very limited in what it can do to bail out the U.S. economy. And I think most people may have an inkling of that just because of seeing the amount of expenditures that the federal government makes, the amount of debt, of course, now $36 trillion in federal debt. That is a big number, and it's more than any other nation on the planet, except for Japan, as a percentage of our GDP. And obviously, you've got a very powerful currency in the world, and so we want to maintain that, I think, but you really can't do that if you have a mountain of debt instead of assets backing your currency. So this is the big concern, and this is certainly why the current administration is hyper-fixated, focused on figuring out a way to pay down the federal deficit, and they're definitely going about it in very dramatic fashion.
The dramatic fashion is also very unsettling. Very unsettling to both conservatives and liberals who think that it is all a show and not necessarily reality and not necessarily based on sound financial planning and judgment. Do you care to comment on that? We only have 30 seconds to our first break.
Yeah, I think it could be that, Trump is a showman. This is background and history. But beyond that, I think there is some veracity to the goal. The goal, I think everyone agrees on. I think how you go about it that's where the rubber meets the road, and it's been a very bumpy road.
On that note, Ivan, we're going to take our first break. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Bruce Cook. My guest tonight is Ivan Illan from Wealth Management. We have so much more to talk about. Do not leave me. We will be right back.